very warm welcome. My name's David Roth and I'm the CEO of the store WPP and chairman of BAV. And it's an absolute pleasure to welcome you to Follow the Sun, 24 hours of broadcasting right across the world, to celebrate the launch of the WPP BAV Best Countries study for 2022, produced in conjunction with the US News and Wharton Business School. It's a pleasure to have you join us for this session. This broadcast is going to travel right across the world, starting in New Zealand and ending 24 hours later in the USA. We have an absolutely packed broadcast today. This year's Best Countries study is our fullest and most comprehensive yet. The attitudes of global business leaders, opinion formers, and citizens towards nation strengths has changed dramatically in recent years, never more so than in 2022. And we'll be looking at how those changes in values have impacted overall perceptions of our 85 nations covered in the 2022 study. But perceptions of a country only tell half the story. We'll then visit 24 countries to hear what's happening from WPP experts on the ground, and sometimes how perceptions of a country don't really reflect the situation. Now, our time together promises to be informative, challenging, stimulating, and I hope fun. So let's get started. How a country is viewed around the world is of huge importance, politically, economically, and socially. It has the ability to contribute to both a nation's hard and soft power. The Romans understood this well. SPQR, an abbreviation for Centanus Populosque Romanus, was arguably the first country branding. It was an emblematic, abbreviated phrase referring to the government of the ancient Roman Republic. You only needed to see the emblem, and invaded countries knew exactly what was in store for them. So country branding itself is not new, but measuring it is. Now in our 7th year, the WPP BAV Annual Best Countries Rankings measures global perceptions of countries against a series of characteristics, impressions that have the potential to drive trade, travel and investment. They also directly affect brands. The study was developed by WPP BAV, the Wharton Business School of the University of Pennsylvania, and US News. The ranking is based on a large global survey which asks a range of people about how they perceive different countries against a range of key attributes. Country branding also has a significant impact on corporate and product brands. The words "made in" can instantly lend credibility and trust to a product or brand that a consumer hasn't previously encountered. That could be enough to convince someone to buy, and beyond that, convince them to pay a premium. Likewise, "made in" can prove an instant turn-off if a consumer associates the country of origin with poor safety standards or sees it as being behind the times on social issues or workers' rights. But it's not just a one-way reaction. The perceptions and performance of brands abroad feed back into the development of the country itself. Additionally, willingness for corporates to invest vital FDI is also closely linked to the strength of a country's brand. As local brands and businesses succeed, they generate economic growth as well as lending further positive associations to their country's brand. There's a close relationship between how people feel about a country and their attitudes towards the brand they associate with that country. Strong countries fuel strong brands and vice versa. Think of France and Chanel. Both represent elegance, glamour and prestige. Chanel is intrinsically French, and France is synonymous with Chanel. The same can be said of Italy and Ferrari, or Japan and Sony. In each case, brands and the countries are part of a virtuous circle, a symbiotic relationship. In fact, Germany is a really fine example of this symbiosis in action. Germany has come to represent the qualities of durability and engineering that brands like Bosch, BMW, Audi and Mercedes have shown the world that Germany can deliver. Brands can both shape and be shaped by the perceptions of their country of origins. Japan in the 1970s was known as a cheap manufacturing base, but now respected as a world leader for quality electronics and also technology, thanks largely to brands like Sony and Toyota. South Korea has taken a similar path, with Samsung and Hyundai demonstrating to the entire world what modern South Korea is and is doing, so creating consumer predisposition in international markets that favour other South Korean brands. There's a two-way reaction and a multiplier effect for both. This year's study quantifies the impact. We see that 83% of consumers globally agree that consumer brands play an important role in defining a country's culture. 78% also agree that the country a product is made in impacts my preference to purchase it. Our annual Best Countries ranking was first launched in 2016 at the World Economic Forum meeting in Davos, the world's largest gathering of global leaders and heads of industry and influence. It's now in its 7th year, and given how turbulent the past 7 years have been across the globe, enables us to see the impact of the changes. The Best Country ranking incorporates the views of close to 18,000 individual members of the public and business decision makers, surveyed in 85 countries across the world. This year's survey was completed in mid-2022. Collectively, the 85 countries in the 2022 rankings account for about 95% of global gross domestic product per capita and represent 80% of the world's population. Individuals surveyed for Best Countries were asked how closely they associated 73 attributes with a range of countries. These attributes were then grouped into 10 categories that were used to calculate the Best Countries ranking, and more on those attributes later. So come with me as we meet our first guests on our interview stage. Well, I'm very delighted now to be joined by Lord Jim O'Neill, the former Chief Economist of Goldman Sachs and a former government UK Minister and Chairman of Chatham House. Jim, Lord O'Neill, thank you very much indeed for joining us.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me on.
President Zelensky has said that the price we have to pay for avoiding a third world war is going to be higher energy bills, increases in the cost of living, and a reduction in living standards. And this comes at a time where we see from our BAV Best Countries study that softer values, sort of like quality of life and social purpose, are much more important in defining a nation's brand. But do you think that public opinion at the moment will pressurise governments to hold their current policies, or do you think they will start to look at alternatives?
Nice, easy question that you start with. I don't know, because it is probably for my generation, never mind the younger generation, the first such issue of this scale and complexity that we've seen. So far, it appears Western nations, who are the prime supporters of Ukraine, of course, have been happy to support the government stance on Ukraine, and superficially accept the cost, which is essentially this enormous cost of living shock. But it remains to be seen how that passes the test of time. So as we're seeing here, the government itself is almost definitely going to have to pay for the cost of this dilemma. I can't help finishing my answer to this very tricky question by also pointing out that if we really want to be serious about climate change and alternative energies, having a permanently higher price for carbon emitting energy forms is probably ultimately the sort of thing that is needed. One would imagine accelerate the desire for alternative energies to become more and more part of everyday life.
Now, you were chairman of the Chatham House, one of the world's leading think tanks. Its mission of a world that is sustainable, secure and prosperous is great. What do you feel, how far are we from realising that goal?
Isn't and hasn't really worked the way it's supposed to do on the tin.
So Jim, what should the priorities of nations be then now?
Yeah, so what should we do about it? You know, I've become linked to a number of things I've been involved in, a big believer in what I broadly call profit with purpose. And we need to have business itself think more about the societal remit of who ultimately they serve. We've lived in an era, and still do, of where the only thing that matters for many, certainly publicly quoted business, is the shareholder. And it's not enough. And private business shouldn't be rewarded if we don't have productivity that goes with these big gains for them. And policymakers need to be more alert to the realities of life rather than just what was in economic textbooks of the 1960s and 70s. And if we don't learn from that, I have a fear that some of the dilemmas that have just blown up dramatically in the past few years out of nowhere could actually get worse.
Now, we started with a hard question, so let's end with an easy one. Lord O'Neill, are you an optimist or a pessimist given the situation we see around the world today?
Right now, I feel a lot more pessimistic than I've done for a long time. However, that said, I've been around the policy area in many different forms for over 40 years, and I've lived through a lot of crises. And the one thing I know for sure is that the crisis you're in, even though it often seems the worst you've ever been through, they come to an end. And one of the big things I've learned is never let a crisis go to waste. And indeed, the making of a business, a leader, or of a country is how they respond to the crisis you are in, because it normally defines how you're going to deal with the future era. So in that sense, there are lots of ways of things that could emerge from all of this mess in a more positive way.
Well, Lord Jim O'Neill, ending on a slightly more positive note than we started, thank you very much indeed for joining us. It's been a privilege to hear what you have to say. Thank you very much indeed.
You're welcome. Thanks for having me joining you.
As we travel around the world together in our Follow the Sun broadcast, we'll be hearing news, views and insights from local WPP company colleagues in 24 of the 85 countries covered in the WPP BAV Best Countries study for 2022. Now, before we go to one of those countries, let's remind ourselves of the WPP BAV Best Countries 2022 rankings from the 85th down to the number 1 country. Let's see what the overall findings of Best Countries 2022 are before we go to Ghana for local insights from the WPP team there. And don't forget to download the Best Countries Metaverse experience for even more global insights from the address on your screen. Historically, military power and finance, banks and tanks were the attributes against which we measured a country's power in the world. Not anymore. So what does all this mean? It shows that a nation focused on providing great quality of life for its people, which cares about the rights and equality, and has a focus on entrepreneurship, is seen as having the most powerful nation brand. This reflects a world today and the factors that influence public perceptions and consumer decision-making, and by implication, a nation's political policy making. So let's take a look at those 10 factors and their weights for 2022. Entrepreneurship, 14.2%. Cultural influence, 10.4%. Power, 5%. Heritage, 3.1%. Adventure, 5.5%. Quality of life, 14.5%. Open for business, 9.3%. Social purpose, 13.5%. Agility, 14%. Movers, 10.6%. So it's clearly no longer just tanks and banks that give a country influence around the world. Softer power, which comes about as a result of entrepreneurship and cultural exports, is increasingly making an impact.
Until recently, the stories of Africa were told from different voices, different perspectives, points of views, and sometimes different agendas. Today, the cosmopolitan cities of Africa are a melting pot of passions, dreams, and desires, and a real desire to tell their story from their own voices. These are stories of a creative past, a vibrant present, and a promise the future holds. Enjoy this glimpse of the sights, sounds, tastes, and experiences of Africa, seen from their own eyes like never before. Here's a story from Ghana.
Akwaba. That's one of the many ways to say welcome in Ghana. Land of over 50 languages and 30 million people, birthplace of the legendary Kwame Nkrumah, and the home of delicacies that have been passed down through the generations. From the coastal south to the savanna plains in the north, Ghana is a melting pot of cultures, a magnet for tourists, and one big family of the most hospitable people alive. Take a journey with us to discover the land of gold, cocoa, oil, creativity, and our most important resource, great people.
Entrepreneurship and the gig economy are in full flow here, and the corporate world has taken notice. Agriculture has been a mainstay of the Ghanaian economy way before independence, employing about 60% of the population. Cash crops like cocoa have brought in foreign exchange, and staples like maize have sustained us. Ghana is rich in agricultural land, yielding bountiful harvests from the savanna to the rainforest. The shea butter and skin creams and the rich dark cocoa and chocolates come from different regions in Ghana. Over time, different local and international organizations like VMLY&R, Blue Skies, and the MasterCard Foundation have played specific roles in growing the sector to what we believe it could be. On the individual level, young people are discovering the untapped potential of Ghana's agriculture, with farming becoming a popular side hustle among the expanding middle class.
Today, through the combination of technology as well as tried and tested methods, the Agri-Tech Challenge by Cosmos Innovation Center is the leading charge towards new methods of farming like automated greenhousing, as well as ways of distribution on the back of digitization.
At Cosmos Innovation Center, we aim to inspire, invest, and transform. And we have focused on agriculture for the past 6 to 7 years, working with the youth in this country to transform the agricultural sector of our country and by extension, the continent. Over the past 6 to 7 years, we have worked with young entrepreneurs who are aspiring to change the landscape of Ghana's agriculture. And we take them through 10 months capacity building, and also give them opportunity to research and hone in on ideas that they have, develop a minimum viable product, and turn these into viable businesses. We've been able to invest in over 24 companies, startups, that are viable and impacting the continent.
From agriculture, we see how Ghana's efforts at equality are reaping rewards, especially in the world of STEM. Through Standard Chartered's Women in Tech program, women who have historically been marginalized are getting opportunities in the exciting world of technology. And this is leaving an impact among women-led businesses and paving a path for future female entrepreneurs.
For us at Sabin Sake, our goal is to live up to the meaning of our name, which in the Hausa language means to transform. Our focus is on harnessing the power of agricultural waste or biomass waste, which in many farming communities will otherwise be abundant or openly burnt or dumped, increasing greenhouse gas emissions. What we do is we transform or convert the waste using a clean energy process, then are able to locally produce organic soil blends, which when added to the soil is able to draw and lock down carbon within the ground, reducing soil emissions, aside improving soil fertility and increasing agricultural productivity.
To say Ghana's youth have taken to entrepreneurship would be an understatement. In fact, many see it as actually going back to our roots, where individuals work for themselves and for the betterment of the entire community. Even in relatively more recent fields like sustainability, young Ghanaians are raising their hands to be counted.
Hello, my name is Ira Makine Siedu, and I'm the founder of Ramafrique and Ramaplast. At Ramafrique, we use African prints and patterns to do bags and other accessories. And at Ramaplast, we attach a bit of plastic waste, mainly water sachets, to this production process to make waterproof bags. So Ramafrique started back on campus, where I just used to refurbish my old bags and my old shoes. And I take it to class or other events. By doing this, I started getting some few friends and family who were interested in the wrapping business, and with time I decided that, well, since I'm getting a number of people being interested, I might as well convert it from a hobby to a business, and that's where Ramafrique was born. So from refurbishment now to production of these bags from scratch.
One word you hear thrown about frequently in Ghana is hospitality. And it is not just a buzzword. Ghanaians are truly hospitable people, ready to welcome anyone who comes calling. We pride ourselves on our vibrant tourism scene, from nature to history. I mean, there's no wonder there are countless spiritual pilgrimages to our castles and forts, seeing as they were the last point of call before being shipped off. But that was centuries ago. Uncle Obama has been here, and so many others.
In 2019, the year of return was all over the news in Ghana. It was how we marked 400 years since slaves were transported to the United States. We threw out the invitation and many of our brothers and sisters in the diaspora came.
Today, Ghana has become the official Christmas entertainment hub every December, with back-to-back shows featuring local and global artists and parties at every popular nightclub. And we totally get it. After all, the music scene these days is a vibe all on its own. Afrobeats has taken the world by storm, and combined with highlife, which is as old as time around these parts, It's not uncommon for DJs to play strictly local content into the small hours at any event. Of course, we're excited about homegrown artists winning global awards for their talent. When they win, we all win.
Another standout for Ghana is our street food scene. Fill your belly on a budget with the sights, smells, textures, and taste of any city, from seafood delicacies to finger foods. Whether you are into sweet, spicy, or savory, there's a flavor for every palate. Of course, if you are more into a taste of your home, choice for international cuisine is as widespread as it is on point.
In Ghana, as in the rest of the world, social media is big. Whether it's funny memes or giving small businesses new access to markets, social media has been a game changer.
Gen Zers especially have taken to TikTok in all its quick hit glory. And where the clicks go, so do the brands. It's been interesting seeing brands navigate their way through this new medium, but we are excited to see those who are actually getting it right. Music artists as brands, for example, are still finding out what's best for them where TikTok is concerned. Not everyone is down with this, however. Some say that the trendy style of TikTok encourages quirky, gimmicky music or cherry-picking only little bits of good music, which isn't necessarily a good thing for the industry. On the other hand, others celebrate it as a new way to open new music to a new generation, giving new artists a voice and discovering new talent, which is good for the industry. You decide.
And thanks to TikTok, one area that has surprisingly got good traction in recent times is, ready for this? Dance crews. Things blew up with Dance Girl Lloyd's feature on Queen Bey's Lion King album, but street dance has been a thing here for decades. When it was taken to the world stage though, it just blew up. So there are tons of dance crews doing their thing all over social media, from TikTok to good old Facebook.
Speaking of moves, we can't wait to show off our flair and colors at the FIFA World Cup again this year in Qatar, in what we've come to see as a birthright among African qualifiers.
This is Ghana.
This is who we are.
We can't wait to share our light with the world. There's no place like home, and Ogilvy is proud to make Ghana home. Such a band of fun-loving, happy people. Thanks for watching us talk about why we're so optimistic about the future.
Well, I'm absolutely thrilled and delighted now to be joined by Dr. Stacey Graham, who is the Global Racial Equity Programs Director at WPP. Stacey, thank you very much indeed for joining us.
Thank you for the invitation.
This year we see social purpose becoming significantly important, which is a good thing. Why do you think that's so?
I believe in the survey you define social purpose around a few categories such as caring about gender and racial equity, the environment, human rights, and so forth, right? And what we understand about humans is we have an innate desire to have a reason for being. That's another word for purpose. So I'd say if we look at what's happened in the world in the last 2.5, 3 years, that is definitely catapulted into the mainstream. We have all these things coming together that are pinpointing, illustrating how we're failing as a collective.
And do you think that failure as a collective is something that's now being exposed right across the globe?
Absolutely. I would say that even before 2020, we could see it happening, but there's something about a restriction of freedom of movement, right, that makes people sit at home and have nothing else to do but recognize and look into everything that's wrong with the world, if you will. And so I think that it's on people's minds. What does it mean to be in a collective when I'm sitting at home and can't leave my house anymore? What does it mean to really be connected as a society? How do we care for the most vulnerable? And to be really honest, with COVID-19, we didn't do a great job of that. So I think people are asking different questions than they were 2 to 3 years ago.
And I think I found it quite interesting to see the relationship between this movement, I mean, let's call it a movement, coming from the population upwards.
Absolutely. I mean, we also see that some of our health officials do move more politically than we would have expected. But there were people across the world who made the decision to wear a mask even when it was no longer mandated, who stayed at home even when they didn't want to, who got on the streets for probably the largest social movement since 1968, right? It was a global social movement to bring awareness to racial inequality. So I think there's a coming together even in times of divisiveness.
Now, one of the things we've seen in the study is this sort of interrelationship between a country's brand and companies' brands, and we're seeing that interrelationship even more sort of mingled and prevalent this year. So what should companies do to improve their social purpose in relation to how their country is seen?
That is a great question. I think that is something that they're still figuring out. But one thing we know for sure is people aren't simply incentivized by money. That's not enough to keep employees today. Employees want to work somewhere where they feel proud of not only the work that they do, but the things that the company stands for. They want to see their company standing up for social issues that they personally care about.
Stacey, why do you think suddenly companies are finding a political voice as opposed to purely a corporate voice?
I think to an extent, we have been able to observe this shift away. When I studied, there was a clear connection. The business strategy has to align with shareholder value. That's all we care about, maximizing shareholder value. And there was a notion that maximizing shareholder value stood in opposition to a social purpose, if you will. And today, I think people are recognizing that's actually not true. And we increase shareholder value when we can ensure that we have high employee engagement, low turnover, and people care about what they do in the company they work for.
Well, Stacey Graham, that's a fantastic place to stop. This whole topic is something that we are all going to have to understand a lot better, and not just understand it, but also ensure that it's actions as opposed to merely words. But for the moment, Dr. Stacey Graham, the Global Racial Equity Programs Director at WPP, thank you very much indeed for joining me.
Thank you.
Hello and a very warm welcome. My name's David Roth and I'm the CEO of the store WPP and Chairman of BAV. Thank you very much indeed for joining me in this very special metaverse experience. exploring the WPP BAV Best Countries 2022 study in conjunction with Wharton Business School and US News. Here we are in the Arrivals Hall, where you'll be able to discover the key insights from this year's study relating to global trends. Here you'll also find exclusive interviews with global experts and analysis of the data. And what a year we've had. There have been a lot of changes from last year. From here you can also go and visit the 85 countries that are ranked in this year's report. Each of those countries have their own individual room where you can explore a wealth of data and insights into each individual country. You might well see some surprises along your journey. And in the departure area, you can discover more about the study itself. Enjoy your trip around the BAV Best Countries 2022 Metaverse. Well, we're almost at the end of our broadcast. A big thanks to everybody from the local WPP companies who've participated, and of course our central team that's put together all of our Follow the Sun 24 hours of broadcasting, to our directors, to Dasgupta, to Paul Reifer, and our producers, Sarah Cousins and Lady Victoria Robinson. Well, all it's left for me, David Roth at WPP, to say thank you very much indeed for joining, and the next broadcast follows shortly on the hour.
From the start.